Hi, this is Bill Kilpatrick. I teach social studies, world history, and right now we're in the age of exploration. If you missed class on Wednesday, January 23rd, this is a chance for you to get caught up. So today I'm going to go over the lesson, and maybe you were there and it just didn't click. Either way, we're going to make sure that you have a chance to see what's going on. So, our lesson, as you can see on the board behind me, is Europe's exploration, European exploration, motives and means. So what we're looking at here is why half of the world decided to go check out the other half. Until about 500 years ago, the two halves of the world were about as far apart as they could be in terms of communication, right? People that lived in Europe had no idea that there were people in the Americas. The Europeans call their part of the world the Old World. They were aware of Africa and Asia, but they were not aware of the Americas. And on the other side of the Atlantic, it was probably pretty much the same thing. Who knows what they knew about the outside world over there? So we have these two halves of the world that are basically developing roughly independently. There had been some other groups like the Vikings who came around the year 1000. The Chinese may have made contact at some point. But the worlds were very much apart. They were separated, isolated. So what happened? Well, we're going to see that as we play out this unit. And today we wanted to look at motivations. Motivations and means. We wanted to look at why people in Europe wanted to go check out the outside world, and also how they managed to do that. So let's see. Let me see what I got. Okay. We started out with a little activity, and the question that I asked everybody was this one. What would you be willing to do? What would you be willing to do? Part of being success, you could say there are basically three parts of success, right? First is know what you want, right? And second, have a plan, how you're going to get there. And then third, go follow through with your plan. There's no point in having a plan if you don't stick to it, right? And if you don't correct the errors as you fall off the path. So in the case of the Europeans, motivation was a big deal, right? Something motivated them. So I wanted you to think about that, and that's why I have this up on the board. It says, what would you be willing to do? Okay, and there are several things I wanted you to think about. All right, one of them was, would you be willing to train every day for years to go to the Olympics? Would you be willing to do your homework every day to get an A? Would you be willing to swim for 4 hours because the boat you're on sank? Would you be willing to walk to the mall if it were a mile from your house? What about go from business to business to look for a job? How about save up money for a car? So that's the first thing I had students do, was think about what would you be willing to do? What would you be willing to do? And whatever it is you're willing to do, we'll talk about it as motivation. If you're not really willing to do certain things, then that kind of limits what you can accomplish, right? So what about these Europeans? What were they into? What I had people do, what I had students do, was they were going to staple a strip to their paper. It had certain questions I wanted them to find answers to. Read the pages from the article. There was an article on pages 384 and 385. And then there were three questions I wanted them to look at. me see if I can get that in here. This is not the best video, but I wanted to give it a try. Never done this before. First one says, who was Marco Polo? How did he influence Europeans to explore the outside world? The second one says, what were the 3 G's? And what does each mean? And the third question was, if I could get that in there, what inventions or discoveries helped Europeans explore the world? So those are the 3 questions I'm trying to find answers to. And that's how I got this thing started. All right, let's take a look at them. See if I can flip this. All right, it's not letting me flip this around. So we'll just start with this slide, which is, I asked, who was Marco Polo? How did he influence Europeans to explore the outside world? This dude right here is Marco Polo. All right. Marco Polo was an explorer. That doesn't tell you much. He was a traveler. Where did he travel to? China. All right. And that was unusual. He was the first European to make his way out to China. And what he did is he discovered a world where people were doing things a little differently from in Europe. China had developed into quite a civilization, and he got a chance to see it. And he was very impressed with what he saw. And when he came home, he wrote a book called The Travels. And in that book, he talked all about what the Chinese were able to accomplish. And it blew people's minds. They just went, whoa, you got to be kidding me. That's amazing. And that got people excited and interested in the outside world. That was a big factor anyway. So chalk it up to Marco Polo. That's a guy I wanted people to look at. Now, there's a follow-up assignment, and you're going to be required to do it. And that is, I want you to watch a video about Marco Polo. Which video? Which video? There are a bunch of them out there. I don't care which one you look at. I mean, you know, if it looks like it was made in the basement of someone's house, don't watch that one. But there are a variety of resources where people talk about Marco Polo. What I want you to do is watch 1, 2, 3. I don't care if it's a big one, a little one, but what I would like you to do is simply give me 10 facts about Marco Polo. And if you want to know what facts I'm most impressed with, it's what he had to say about China. Because that is the stuff that impressed everybody in Europe and made them all want to go to China, or at least get out of Europe and see the world. Make sense? All right. So that's the homework that I want you to do. Now let's go on to the next thing. I asked people to tell me what the 3 G's were. And you're going to need to know what the 3 G's were. Well, I'm going to cut to the chase. I'm not going to play coy here about the 3 G's. It's answer choice C. All right. If you look at answer choice C, it says God, gold, and glory. Okay. God, gold, and glory. What does that mean? Well, we're going to look at that. We're going to look at how each one of those had an effect. First is God. The people of Europe were very religious. And in Western Europe, the major religion was Catholicism. The Protestant Reformation was starting to kick in. And so you're going to have Protestants and Catholics. And they're all going out to convert the world to their particular faith. So that was a big deal. Trying to convert a new audience to Christianity, whichever version of Christianity that explorer thought was important. But, you know, it's a basic part of the Christian message that you have to believe in Jesus to be saved. So anybody who was really that, devoted, devout, they were going to try to share the message. And so they need to leave Europe. If there are people outside of Europe who haven't heard the gospel message, we need to take it to them. And if you're Catholic, you want to make sure that they hear the Catholic side first. If you're Protestant, you're going to want to make sure that they hear the Protestant side. So God was a big part of it. Another reason people left Europe was gold. All right. Now we're going to look at that. Gold doesn't just literally mean gold. Gold means any form of wealth, any resources that these people could get their hands on so that they could get rich, right? They wanted to obtain resources. The big resource at the time were spices. All kinds of really nifty spices. Think about the things that are in the spice rack at your house. So you got, I got cinnamon and paprika and ginger and, pepper, various spices. And that was all new to Europe, and those sold for a lot of money. The spice trade was very valuable, and it was one of the reasons that Italy did very well, because Italy had been trading with Asia. It was closer to the action. They'd take their boats out across the Mediterranean, and then they would exchange food from Europe for spices and other things from the East, which they refer to as the Indies, right? And they got it along what was called the Silk Road that ran across Asia. Problem, there was a big war, and that blocked the road. So now you have other countries saying, hey, let's go by boat. Let's do an ocean route to the Indies. First one gets rich. So we're going to see that as a big thing, that they wanted to obtain riches. And that's what the gold part stands for. It could be any kind of riches. It could be those spices. It could be gold, silver, copper. It could be new foods. As we talked about before, there were foods in the Americas that no one had in Europe. Potatoes, tomatoes, squash, yams, things like that. They had animals like the turkey and the llama that no one had seen in Europe before. So there's a lot of stuff. There's even later on trees, just lumber from the forests. And they would start planting sugar in the tropical soil and have plantations where they could make molasses and sugar. And that was a big deal. So money, 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 money. That's what gold stands for. Then we get to the last one, which was glory. Glory. Who doesn't want to be famous? Who doesn't want to be in the books? Because if you discover a whole new land, you get to name it after yourself. And there's a lot of that went on in the New World. Columbus. We're going to look at Columbus. A lot of places are named after Columbus. Where's our national capital? It's in the District of Columbia. What does that mean? Well, they made a federal district so that our national capital is not in any specific state. And that capital, they call that federal district the District of Columbia. Guess who it's named after? Columbus. South America's got a country called Colombia, named after Columbus. There's a river in the Northwest called the Columbia River. Today there's a TV network, CBS, the Columbia Broadcast System. CBS, named after Columbia. So you have a lot of stuff that you can name after various people. And so being famous is also a big thing. So you got those three things. Gold, God, gold, and glory. Those three things that people wanted to aspire to. That brings us to the next thing. What inventions? Put that over here. What inventions? All right, you can see why it's so much better to come to class than have me make a video. What inventions or discoveries helped Europeans explore the outside world? All right, what is it? Well, first we got the caravel. All right. The second is cartography, which is map making. The third are currents. So I call them the 3 C's. Sue me. Here we go. First one, caravels. All right. There's a certain type of ship, and it's called a caravel, and it was a good ship to use. You'll notice the front end of this boat is pointed. It's very sharp. It's intended to cut through the water as quickly as possible, like a speedboat. if your speedboat ran off of bed sheets and wind. All right. Now, the second half of this boat, that's the fat end. This is the cargo hold. This is where you put all your junk in the trunk. So there you go. All right. This is what I like to call a nautical mullet. All right. It is basically, it's a Michael Bolton, the original Michael Bolton. So you got basically, it's all business in front, party in the back. All right. Up front, nice and fast, like a speedboat. In the back, big and fat, put that junk in the trunk. Yeah. And I got a bunch of pictures of stuff like this. I like these caravels. I think they're really cool looking. And if you'd come to class, you would have seen this PowerPoint slide. And you would have said, wow, that's amazing. Yeah. Or not. Come on. What's going on here? All right. Oh. You know what's gone wrong is I need to do it like this. All right. So, come on. Come. I got this thing's not. All right, we're back. We're back. Okay. Here's another picture of a caravel, and isn't that a gorgeous ship? All right. Sharp in the front and fat in the back. There we go. So, I got bunches of pictures of these, and you can just do your own. There, come on. There we go. You can do your own little web search for caravels, and it's quite a ship design. The whole idea, though, is to be able to get out there, get the goodies, and bring them back. Do it with maximum speed. You're trying to combine speed with cargo capacity, and that's what the caravel design was all about. Second thing, and that is cartography. All right, map making. I mentioned to you, if you want to be successful at something, you got to know what you want, but then you got to have a plan, a way to get it, steps you can take that will allow you to get from point A to point B. Well, that's the same thing here. You need a map. You need a map to follow. Now, how do you know where to go if you have no map? And that was something they had to work with. This generation started making maps and cataloging and categorizing and improving maps. The more knowledge they could incorporate, the more efficient, because that way they could just follow the most direct route to get there. That would shave time. It would also mean that it costs them less in resources. They had a better chance of getting there, and maybe getting there for less so that they make more profit off the load of cargo they were going to get. So these guys start making maps, and that's important. I had a student ask me, well, how do you make a map if you don't know what it looks like? How do you find out what it looks like? They didn't have satellites. They didn't have planes flying overhead. So how did they make their maps? They did it by just feeling their way out. They would pilot their boat, stay along the coast. They had an instrument called an astrolabe, which we're going to get into tomorrow. But it basically, by looking at their position among the stars, they could tell how far down the globe they were going, how far south they were going, and that gave them a better sense, right, of at least where they were. And so they would keep very detailed descriptions of the coastline, and they slowly began to fill out the map. In the case of Africa, that was a big one that they wanted to really check out, because we're going to learn about a guy named Prince Henry. They called him the Navigator. And what he did is he assembled a group of map makers and ship's captains. He brought together as many people as he could. And what he did was they integrated all of the knowledge about cartography. And they started to build a map. And they started to do something very interesting. which was they wanted to build they wanted to set up a network of trade routes around Africa. They wanted to go around Africa, go all the way down through the bottom of Africa, and come up to India. They had some general idea of what that entailed. They didn't really know. They would have one sailing venture after another, and they started to set up trading posts and later forts with African peoples, and they started to trade. And it took them easily 50 years to go from Portugal all the way to India. It's the kind of thing that took a long time because they were doing it one step at a time. So that was the second thing, maps. If you want to know where to go, you gotta know where that is. So you need maps. The third thing were currents. The water and the air aren't stagnant. You're trying to get across the ocean on a bed sheet and wind, right? So what are you going to do? Well, one of the things is that we notice is that the air and the water, they don't just sit there, okay? That's really important to know. That in fact there are currents, and if you follow the currents, you can get there faster, a lot more in your favor. So we're going to look at that. There are a couple of different kinds of currents that we talked about in class. One is called trade winds, and if you look at that, what you'll notice is there are currents that tend to go west. They go in a westward direction, okay? And so if you're trying, for example, for Columbus, if you're trying to get first he's trying to get to the Indies, and we'll look at that. But he's trying to get out there. He's going to go at a time of year where the wind is most favorable. It's like a launch. In fact, they use that same term. A lot of the terms that they would later use in aviation, in airplanes, and in space exploration, launch, boarding, captain, pilot, ship, all that stuff that almost sounds like sci-fi, science fiction. It started here with launching these ships. So you go when the currents favor it. Certain times of the year, the trade winds will push you out, and you can go west with that. Other times of the year, you use another kind of current called the westerlies, right? And again, depends on where you are. But in the case here with Europe, what they wanted is certain times a year. Well, I'd make a lousy weatherman. Certain times a year, it goes eastern. It goes east. That's the weird thing. Westerlies go east. So it's going this way now, all right? And that means you got to know your way around the currents. Those are the 3 C's. Those are the 3 C's. Where, there's a certain amount of information that we can do in a single day. So you got to know your 3 G's. God, gold, and glory. And you need to know your 3 C's, which is caravels and caravels. There goes my brain. Caravels, cartography, maps, and currents. All right? So those are motives and methods. And that's what we did today in class. Don't forget to go online and look for 1 or more videos about Marco Polo. Remember, it can be a long video or it can be a series of short videos. I just need 10 things about Marco Polo. Why? He's just one guy in a much larger story. However, sometimes these one guys can help. It's like an anchor. You can anchor to a key figure in history. And Marco Polo is one of those key figures. He got people excited about going out to visit the world. All right, that's it. So get it done. And thank you for watching.